Hello everybody, my name is Josh Novak, and today what I'm going to be doing is demonstrating how to throw a cylinder on the potter's wheel. Also today we have a visitor. Say hello, Noor.
Hi.
Noor is working here at the center, and she's going to be working on her own work while we're doing this demonstration. So if you see her in the background, she's here quietly working on her own work as well. Now, what we are going to do first, before we step on the wheel and do anything, is we're going to prepare our clay. So our clay will typically come in a big block like this. What we need to do first is we'll have to weigh out a certain amount. Now, for the cylinder that I have to do today, I'm going to weigh out about 3 kilograms of clay, or that's around 6 pounds. Now, I'm using kind of an old-fashioned scale, and when it hits the top, it's too heavy, and when it stays on the bottom, it's too light, but when it floats in the middle, it's just right. So I have my amount of clay. Now I'm going to begin to wedge. So I'm taking my clay together, and I'm kind of balling it up, and what I'm doing is I am pushing the clay down with my body and my hands, and I'm stopping at a certain point. Now, this is similar to kneading dough, and if you've ever made bread before, this will be very familiar. The only difference, though, is that when you are making bread, you're trying to put air into it. But when you're making something ceramic or clay with clay, you're trying to get the air out, because these air bubbles, what they do is they create weak spots, and they are imperfections in your final ceramic work. So what I need to do is I'm putting my hands together, my palms kind of close together, and also my elbows are kind of close to my body. And what I'm doing is I'm pushing down. So when I push down like this, I'm stopping when my pinkies touch the table. If I don't stop, I push it out too flat. See, this thickness is too thin, okay? And the issue with that is when I bring it back up to twist it again, it will fold. You see how that folds down? It will fold rather than twist together and push out air. So actually it could fold down and trap more air and create more problems. And that's what I don't want. Okay? So I'm going to continue wedging. So I'm pushing down, lifting up with my fingers, grabbing a little bit lower, and pushing down again. Same thing. Now, this method, it's called monkey head or ram's head, depending on how you see it. Okay, and that's due, it kind of looks like a monkey's face, or a ram's head because of the spiral. So I'm going to continue to do this. Now, a way to do this properly is to wedge it about up to 100 times per singular piece of clay, which seems like a lot, but with practice, you can end up doing 100 rather quickly, 100 wedges. Also, potters, they will tend to wedge large amounts of clay at one time, so you can have something around like 25 pounds or 12 kilos of clay at one time wedged up, and then they would throw multiple pieces off that chunk. Now, as I have this little tongue at the end, what I'm going to do is kind of roll that up tightly. Okay, and I'm doing that to ensure that no air gets into that clay. Now, at the end of that, I've rolled it up. I'm going to turn it about 90 degrees and start all over. And I'm doing the same technique over and over, okay? Now, as I get tired, if you're using your arms, you can use your body. So what I do is I put my left foot in front, my right foot a little bit behind, but at an angle. And what I'm doing with that is I'm using my body weight to help me wedge. So if you see, I'm kind of leaning rather than pushing with my arms. Because if I do this, for 10 pieces, I would be worn out. And I would be so tired, I probably couldn't even throw on the potter's wheel after that. So I'm going to finish my wedging. I'm getting a little wet, so I'm going to move over. Now I have my chunk of clay wedged up. Now, at the end, you can kind of see how this is uneven. So what I'm going to do is putting it on the table, I'm rotating around like a singular point, so it's pivoting. So what that does is it cleans it up. See how there's very little, if not any, wrinkles? And that's what I don't want on the bottom. So, it has that little mushroom, so what I'm going to do now is kind of tap that towards the middle. Okay, now I'm going to take this over to the potter's wheel. So, now at the potter's wheel, what we have to do first is you have to understand what we are using at it, okay? So at the bottom, there's this little foot pedal, and that is helping me control the speed and the direction that the clay is going, okay? So if I'm right-handed, I'm spinning counterclockwise, okay? If I'm left-handed, it's spinning clockwise, so it's actually spinning towards me. And those can be directed towards the bottom here on the wheel as well. So, also, before you start throwing any pieces, you need some tools, okay? So, the first tool that we used earlier was a wire tool, and that's going to be helpful later on. The next tool is a sponge. And that's for adding water, taking away water, and maybe smoothing a piece in certain things. The next thing is a needle tool. So this is a piece of wood with a small sharpened metal point. Next tool is a wooden tool. This tool has a flat edge, which is very important later on. And then, of course, a bucket of water. Another additional thing is you can use a board, or this is just a bat. And the last thing is you need your amount of clay, okay? So what we're going to do is we take our clay chunk and we locate the middle of our wheel, and we're going to put that as close as we can towards the middle. Now what we have to do as well is kind of tap it down to the wheel head itself, because if we don't, and we start adding water and everything, water can get underneath of it and the whole piece could fly off of the wheel. And that's what we do not want. So, first things first, I'm adding water to my clay. And this is to help move the clay around. It's kind of like lubrication if you're using metal or something like that, like oil, if you're using something in the metal shop. But what we have to do first is I'm going to squeeze my hands together. Now, notice also my elbows are sitting on top of my thighs. Okay, this is for stability. Because if I start up here and I start working with the clay, it's going to get very jagged and rigid. Okay? You're not going to have a whole lot of support. And you need that stability to be able to push around a significant amount of clay. Now, I'm also varying the speed with that foot pedal. It's just out of your eyesight, but imagine like a car pedal. The more I push down, the faster it goes. The more I let go, the slower it goes. Now, how I'm grabbing this clay is I'm scooping my hands together towards the bottom, and I'm slowly lifting them up. Okay, as I kind of pinch them up and lift them, I'm also squeezing them. I'm like folding them kind of like a book, right? I'm not just like closing my hands right away. I'm kind of gently squeezing it. What that's doing is it's passing the clay through, and then when I get towards the top, I kind of curve my thumb over the top to avoid kind of this like little hole that forms at the top. So I'm squeezing gently over top before it gets too tall. Now what I'm doing here, this is called wheel wedging, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm conditioning the clay, just like what we did when we wedged, conditioning the clay to throw, okay? Now, when I need to bring it down, I have to tilt it. So from your angle, I'm tilting it away, but for me, I'm tilting it to my left. It can be in any direction, but I'm more comfortable with it at the left. So I'm holding the clay a little bit lower with my left hand, tilting it away, and I'm pushing down. So that tilt uses the centrifugal force of the wheel to help me center the clay. Now for me to get this on center, which means like spinning cleanly, like you see this bump, you see how it's wiggling? Like I'll make it worse here. Okay? So this is not on center. And for it to look on center, it has to be spinning cleanly. Okay? So this is an essential method. Okay? But it's more difficult to center the clay right away if it's not wedged on the wheel first. Like, you can do this, but what you miss out on with this amount of clay is that clay in the middle is not centered. So when you wheel wedge it, you bring that clay up into a thin tube, and then all of that clay gets activated, touched, and centered itself, so when you bring it back down, the entire piece of clay has been worked and kind of stretched out. So I'm bringing it up again. Same thing, I'm working from the outside, I'm kind of scooping. Set scoop again. Also, I'm staying in pace with the wheel, so I'm trying not to rush. Same thing. Push it down. One more time. So as I bring it down the last time, what I'm going to do is that my left hand, you can't see it on the side, but it's kind of cupping on the side, and it's holding firm. Okay, so one thing about centering is it needs firm pressure, but it needs consistent pressure. If my hand's moving all the time, the piece cannot stay in the middle. So I always tell my students think of something mechanical, like a robot, something that moves very kind of methodically and very precise. Because if you don't, and your hand's very moving and you're always doing this, it will never be on center. Also, one of the things that you tend to do when you're working with clay the first time is you're not breathing. So when you hold your breath, your body starts to panic. And when you start to panic, then some of the issues are your body tries to move. You're trying to struggle for air, so you're not going to be able to sit as still. So keep that in mind while you're working. A lot of the times it's hard to recognize when you stop breathing. It's usually me pointing out to the students whether or not they're breathing or not. So what I'm going to do now is my piece is as close to being on center as it can be, okay? And also the height and the shape are optimal, okay? You want this kind of sloped dome, this hemispherical dome that's a little flat on top, because this is like the easiest method. See how it kind of fits my hand naturally, right? If it's too high, then it's going to stretch my hands too far, or too low, it's going to be too much of a struggle to get the clay up. Okay, so this is the optimal shape that we want. So the next thing that we have to do is I'm pushing with the inside, pushing directly in the middle with my thumbs, and I'm pushing straight down towards the base. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop a significant distance away from the base because I don't want to hit this wheel head. If I do, the piece is going to be hollow, and I don't want that if I'm making a nice functional cylinder. Okay? So, I'm pushing directly down towards the middle. Now, one thing that you need to understand is I'm not racing the wheel. I'm not going as fast or faster than the wheel is spinning. So I have a distance that I think is okay. So stop my wheel, push my needle tool in the middle. I'm going down with my index finger. As soon as my index finger touches the depth of the clay, just that surface, I'm not pushing anymore. I'm going to push that finger against the needle tool and hold it up. Okay? So that distance right there, that is actually about 2 fingers wide. And now if I hold that up next to my ruler, that's over an inch. It's about over an inch in thickness. And so what I'm looking for is about a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, also about 1 centimeter in thickness. So I can go about 1/2 a fingernail deeper. So I'm doing that with my index finger. Then I'm going to check again. Because you always want to double check. Okay, I still have more to go. Because once you go too far, that's it. It's really difficult to kind of fill in that void again. Okay. It's about a 1/2 inch now, so I'm happy with that. Now that I've found my depth, now what I need to do is widen the base. So I've found how deep I need to go, now I need to widen it out. Then the next step that we're going to do is we're going to kind of cone and bring it up before we start pulling. So, what I'm going to do now is I have my left hand, my left finger's on the inside and my left thumb on the outside. So what I'm going to do is, with my right hand, I'm kind of gently pulling my fingers out wider. Now, one thing that I'm not doing is I'm not squeezing my left hand all together. So I'm not squeezing my fingers like this. It's more like this. So my thumb is staying the same, but my fingers are pulling out wide. Now what I'm doing with this sponge, I added a bit of water, and I'm just taking a little bit of that away. Going back out. Now I have it about 2 hands wide. That is significantly wider than what I want, but when I cone it in, it's actually going to shrink a little bit in the width of the base. So this is actually okay. This is ideal for right now. So before I do the next step, I'm going to add some water. Now, with my hands on the outside like this, I'm going to gently cone it back in. So I'm going to start out with the same width and then gently kind of and slowly move my hands in to help bring that clay inward. So what this is doing is allowing me and conditioning the clay to move up and towards the middle. So when it's up and towards the middle, and the higher it is, it's actually easier for you to pull it higher. If it's out wide and short, it's much more difficult to bring that clay in and up as you're pulling. So this is it's helping condition the clay to be the shape that I want it to. Also at the top, I'm kind of creating this little T shape, and this is helping me prepare that clay. And it helps recenter. So my left hand my index finger is on the inside, and my thumb is on the outside. They're not squeezing, but they're just sitting there and kind of guiding the clay. And then my index finger kind of presses gently on top. Because if your top is kind of a little wobbly, like that, it will help recenter it. You might need to apply a little bit of pressure if it's really off, but gentle. So now what I'm doing is I'm adding a little bit of water on the inside, a little bit of water on the outside. Now what I'm going to do is I'm about ready to pull. I'm going to do one last thing. It's a little undercut. So with that undercut, I'm kind of creating a little divot, okay, kind of an angled section. It's going to allow me to really get underneath of that clay and lift it up. So, what I'm going to do is my left hand is going to sit in the inside, and then it's going to push from the outside. My left hand is on the inside, and it's going to act as a wall. Okay? So, my index finger is going to be straight. My fingers are going to be straight down. I'm not going to make a fist or anything like that, because that clay is going to take that shape. Whatever shape I make of it and push against it hard enough, the clay is going to form to that shape. So I want a straight, even cylinder, so I'm going to choose this side of my index finger. Now, what my right hand is going to do, it's going to make this shape with my fingers. So my thumb's going to sit inside of my index finger, and my index finger is going to wrap around my thumb. This is a very tough and rigid form that your hand can take. What we're going to do with that is we're going to use the right hand to scoop that clay from the outside and push against this hand that's on the inside. Okay? Now this shape, or what I'm going to use from this hand, is it's also called a knuckle pull, because I'm going to be pushing with my knuckle. The knuckle is going to be against the metal wheel head and kind of scrape this clay up. Now what I'm going to do is you're going to see me use the knuckle first, and then I'm going to turn my hand to like the softer, more padded parts of my fingers, and that's going to help kind of direct the clay better. Because if I just use the knuckle, it's just going to scrape that clay off, and I'm going to end up losing a lot more clay than if I just use the softer part of my hand. So, my left hand's going to sit in the middle. Now, one thing also is I have to keep my elbow up, Because if I tilt it, I'm actually going to change my angle. So when I start pulling, my angle might go in or it might go out, and instead of getting a nice straight cylinder, I'm going to end up with like a big flared bowl or something not that I want. So, left hand is in, right hand is at the same level, and what I mean is, like my hands are in sync. Do you get that? So they're not, one's not behind the other, one's not in front, they're on the same level. So if I'm pinching them together, my hand is pushing into this other hand. It's too common for when you first start for the hands to get out of sync. And what happens with that is the piece won't rise or won't behave effectively. So I'm going to slow down my wheel a little bit. Now, I'm ready for my first pull. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push gently in, inside. I'm holding that clay there. And I've already switched to the padded part of my finger. I'm breathing, making sure that I'm breathing effectively. And I'm getting this little bit of buildup, but I'm not worried about this chunk of clay, okay? It's too common for people when they're starting to focus on that. And when you focus on those little things, it ends up ruining the whole piece. Okay, I'm recentering my lip. So I pulled, I recenter my lip. I add water, I kind of clean up the piece. Do one more thing. I'm going to cone a little bit. So what this is going to do is I'm going to bring this clay in. So I just kind of made like an aperture. I just thought of my hands like an aperture. So my hands are coming in and they're touching that outside, and then they're kind of pinching that clay gently as much as it will move with that pressure, and then I move up towards the top. Now I don't want to pinch it all the way closed or anything because I still have to work with it, but I want it in. Okay? So I'm going to go in again. Now this time, I'm actually going to stand, and I'm doing this because it's allowing me to keep my arms straighter. If I'm sitting down, sometimes my elbow, if I'm not used to it, my elbow might take me at a different angle. It might take it at a different angle. Does that make sense? So if I'm standing up straight, it's easier, it's more natural to hold my arms like this. Okay? And so your arm kind of wants to sit straight when you stand. So I'm doing the same thing. Now, as I get taller, as this starts to increase, what I need to pay attention to is this clay is getting much thinner compared to the bottom. And what that means is my pressure has to change about halfway through. So if I don't change my pressure, my piece is going to come up to this point. As my pressure keeps increasing, it's going to come up to this point and get so thin at the top that it might collapse. Just like if enough of it is thin, it would collapse. Okay? And also my angle would be very off-putting if it's very thin and sharp at the edge. It's not very functional and it doesn't survive too long. So my next pull, make sure I cleaned up the piece. So the water on the inside is taken care of. You kind of repeat this process. Make sure it's recentered and I'm ready to go. So I'm making sure that I'm moving consistently. So because you can see here that if these spirals are moving too fast, or they're kind of, can you see that? If you see this kind of diagonal spiral, I'm moving too fast. I'm staying in sync with the wheel. So what that gets at, if I show you here, is you see this piece of clay? So every time that goes around, that's one rotation. So if I go faster than that, that's where I end up getting the spiral. If I go slower, like going slower, it just takes longer. But if I go too fast, that's where I get like a spiral, right? So if I move my finger fast, you can see how I can get a spiral really quick. If I go at the same speed though, that's where you get the even distribution of pressure. Okay, so I'm going to speed this up. So I'm going to cone again. It's a little dry at the top, so I'm just going to make sure I have enough water. Now this time I'm going to make sure I have a little bit of water on my left inside hand, because if this inside arm touches the clay wall, I want it to be able to move smoothly. And if it doesn't, it's going to be a big problem. It could catch and ruin the whole piece. Now what I just did there with my thumb is I put it on my wrist. That's to help with stability, because I'm moving my hand so far away from the wheel that if I don't kind of bridge my hands at times, I can get tired myself. And even though if you have a lot of experience, it's too hard. You don't want to, it takes a while to get to this spot. And so if you make a mistake at this time, it can be catastrophic. And that's what I don't want. So I'm going to check my height. I got a little bit to go. I'm just about at the 30 centimeter or 12-inch mark. So I need about another pull. And see also this shape, it's kind of bowed. What I can do before I go again is I'm going to help strengthen the cylinder by using this wooden tool. So since it has that flat side, what I'm going to do is I'm holding that flat side against the wall of the cylinder. And what this is doing is it's A, taking away all the surface slip, but B, also straightening out and smoothing the piece. Also, I want to make sure I don't have too much water sitting at the bottom, because that water can lead to the piece breaking. Okay, so I'm going to do the final pull. it up a little bit. Actually, you want one more. It's not at the right height still. Just slowly grabbing a little bit more each time. Now, since it's getting thinner, clay is very soft, starting to get some wobbles. This tends to happen quite a bit as you start to get taller, elongated forms. It's important to just be careful, proceed to caution. Like sometimes the clay is at different consistencies, and you just have to be aware of that. Softer clay tends to collapse a little bit more and have a little bit more movement. It's more susceptible to movement. And kind of drier clay that absorbs more of the water that comes in with the bag, it tends to be a little bit stiffer, so it's a little bit tougher to center and easier to throw. And this one is easy to center but tougher to get to tall heights because it tends to collapse a little bit. So we're about right at there. I'm going to try to cone it and see if I can squeeze out a little bit more height. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my sponge to help scoop up some of this clay. Now what the sponge is doing is it's acting kind of as a little buffer between my finger and the clay. So what it allows is it allows a little bit indirect pressure, so I can be as specific with the finger, but I actually can grab a little bit more with the sponge. Now the problem with that is you don't have as much feeling as with the knuckle or the finger. So it takes a bit of practice, but with the right practice, you can get it to the space that you need. So we've about reached the height that I need. And so what I'm going to do is just demonstrate the last bit of taking off the cylinder. So what you need to do is first you're going to add a little bit of water to the wheel head, and you're going to use this wire tube. So you're going to push down with your thumbs and pull the wire through the water and through the bottom of your piece. What you don't want is you don't want to bend your wire up because that will cut through the piece, and you do not want that. So I added more water, and I'm going to keep making passes. You want to keep pulling through until your piece comes off of the wheel. So then you're going to grab underneath. Set it. Kind of move one hand at a time, gently onto that. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you is what a cylinder should kind of look like. Now, so you should have a flat base, square walls, okay? Now, this one is a bit thicker than what you need. You should be able to pull it a little bit thinner. Based off of the wetness of the clay, it's kind of uncomfortable to go a little bit further. The structural integrity of the piece might collapse. But for a cylinder, this is the ideal shape, okay? And I'd like to thank you for watching and participating. I really appreciate it, and see you later.